All right, everybody, good morning and happy Halloween. Hopefully you are not watching this video today and that you're enjoying some downtime with friends and family. I'm hoping to do the same. I'm just going to briefly do this wrap-up video and talk a little bit about this upcoming week, and then we'll be done. And then I'm going to do a PowerPoint video this week on the two chapters that you're supposed to read, cultural diversity and gender, and then inclusion classrooms dealing with students with special needs. So I'm not going to hit everything on the PowerPoint. I just think there's a few ideas in that PowerPoint that I want to touch upon and maybe give you some tips and ideas on. So let's talk a little bit about this last week. You had two assignments. You had the group discussion about whole community, or whole school, excuse me. I'm losing my mind today. Whole school approaches. And then you had the classroom management strategy. So I want to first touch upon kind of like the whole school approaches. Some advice that I want to give you is when you go to have your interview with your principal, that would definitely be a question you may want to ask that principal. They interview you, they ask you questions, but principals will always open up time maybe at the end of the interview, or you can always, slip it in between if you feel like it's appropriate to ask certain questions of the school and of the principal that you would like to know. Please understand that just because you're going in for a job does not mean that has to be your job. It's kind of a two-way reciprocal process. You want to know as much about the school as the principal wants to know about how you're going to fit well with that school. So the reason why I threw out that question this week is so that you can, again, be thinking about your own philosophy. Would you do well in a whole school approach? Would you not do well in a whole school approach? What is your philosophy of dealing with classroom management? I have worked in various schools, schools where principals are kind of like, look, run your own classroom management plan. I've had schools where I've worked out where the school is very prescriptive about the classroom management plan they expect to have. I think every school has some kind of a base, but I think important to consider is how you're going to function within that role. There's pros and cons to both. I mean, obviously, a lot of you had mentioned, and I'm remembering a couple posts that I read where a few of you were like, look, no, I want autonomy. I want to be able to do things my way. I don't want to feel restricted, especially when I'm trying to meet the needs of my learners, and that's a great philosophy to have. And you'll have principals that will let you do that. And so that's the pro on kind of having your own management plan. The con is that then you have students that are coming to your classes, especially at the secondary level, that have different expectations in different classes, and then it's hard for them to kind of patternize their behavior. So they're trying to adjust to 6, 7 different teachers every single day on what they expect, and they're kids, they're teenagers. They have a hard time remembering things, and they may exhibit behaviors in your class that the other teacher said, it's okay that you do, but you may say it's not. Let me give you an example. So technology in the classroom, you may have some teachers that are like, yeah, it's okay if you listen to music while you work independently. And some teachers may say, well, no, that's not a part of my classroom management plan. And so then you have discrepancy, and then you're having issues between classes. And so that's kind of the con of having every teacher have their own individual way of managing their classroom. On the pro side for whole school approaches, then you don't have that issue. Every student knows what's expected of them every single class. You kind of have a consistency throughout the entire building, and it makes it really smooth for students to be able to go from class to class and expect the same behaviors and the same style and consequences and different things from the teachers they have. And then again, on the con side of that, then you have teachers that feel limited, right? You have certain behaviors that get exhibited, but you have to follow a certain plan. You feel kind of restricted, and you feel if you were to do it maybe a different way, that wouldn't be the case. So let me give you an example. I have a student right now who would not fit really well in the mold of having a whole school approach where, if every teacher was doing it a certain way. She just has different needs. She's a little bit, to give you a little bit of background without going too much into her personal history, she has attachment issues, and so she will challenge authority a lot because she just wants to see if that authority is going to do what everybody else has done to her and just kind of abandon her and ditch her. So she acts out a lot, and because she acts out a lot, she's testing the boundaries. She's kind of on that Maslow hierarchy of needs. And because of that, in a whole school approach, we would say, well, consistently, we need to treat her like this and this and this. Whereas in an individual approach, each teacher, or at least in my case, I'm trying to work with her a little bit, maybe be a little bit more lenient with some obtrusive behaviors, simply because I'm trying to build her trust, and that's working for me. It's actually building my trust with her a lot more. She likes coming to my class a lot more. She comes and visits me more after school and in between classes just to say hi, those kinds of things. Um, so just so you know, you got to balance. That was the purpose of that assignment, and hopefully, or the purpose of that discussion, and hopefully you saw that by listening to your peers, that there's just pros and cons to every side of the management approaches that are being introduced to you. And hopefully throughout this semester, and I say hopefully, I don't need to say hopefully, I've seen it, you've been able to grapple with kind of the pros and cons of each side and really decide for yourself what's going to fit your philosophy best. So nice job this week on the discussions. In terms of the classroom management strategy assignment, I feel really bad. I had a couple of comments where students said, they posted their class or their content specific strategy, and it wasn't quite what I was looking for. And then even some of them mentioned, I hope this is what I'm supposed to be doing, but the assignment was kind of vague. So that tells me right off the bat, I did something wrong, and I apologize for that. I actually brought my wife, who was a teacher, into my class and said, hey, can you take a look at the way I've described this assignment? Because I'm getting, obviously, some feedback that is showing that a few of my students don't understand. And she said the same thing. She kind of felt like, no, you didn't explain that explicitly enough. So for that, I apologize. Don't worry about having points taken off if you've done it wrong. That's not the purpose of that. The purpose is learning, right? So if you did it and you did the best you could, I appreciate it. Let me just give the whole class some feedback of the purpose of that assignment now that we've finished that assignment for the semester. I just really wanted you to have some applicability in terms of classroom management. So we have all these theories and all these kind of vague, big concepts about how we should, manage classrooms in terms of philosophy. But what does that look like in the day-to-day? So I just wanted you to take those activities and think about, okay, I'm a science teacher. I'm going to do labs in my classroom. I'm a history teacher. And history teachers, I want to just clap for you and commend you for really having a philosophy of trying to create more active classes. I loved listening to your classroom management strategies this time. A lot of you hinted on the same theme. History is a boring subject. We want to make it more active, but to make it more active, we need to do ABC. So that was excellent. English classrooms, Socratic seminars, very group-led discussions. It's what an English class lends itself to. Math classes, how are you going to help them get to that higher level thinking in terms of, their homework, and do they really understand the problems? Do they know how to problem solve? Are they collaboratively working together to solve these problems? Those are instructional decisions you have to make day to day. And I hear this a lot from principals and instructional leaders, they say under a well-managed classroom, things are amazing. You can see some very high-level instructional activities. Under a poorly managed classroom, you won't. And so that was the purpose of that assignment, is to think about, again, context. So I'm going to go into my math class. A lot of you mentioned the idea about homework. I want to create, a better environment where students can collaborate and work together on their homework. Okay, so that's the context. How are you going to do it? That's where the strategy comes in. So hopefully you've learned from your mentors, or you've read a book, or you're doing your own research, or you're reflecting and just coming up with creative, innovative ideas about how you're going to better manage an environment that creates higher level instruction. It could be another thing too. It could just be like we've talked about, students are talking in class, or I want to have group work, but I don't really know how to play group work out because we have, one student will do all the work and the other three are going to sit back and just have a vacation. These are the instructional decisions and context that you're going to deal with day to day. And so I wanted you to be thinking about, what can I do? What strategy can I implement to ensure that the students reach the goal that I have set forth for them, or that they have set forth for themselves? And then reflecting on why that strategy has worked, will work, those types of things, and specifically what's it helping in the 4 purposes of classroom management. Is it creating a safer classroom? Is it creating more flow? Is it minimizing poor behavior and misbehaviors? Is it increasing instruction? So really, in a nutshell, I wanted you to be able to walk away understanding what a classroom management strategy was. It is a skill. It is that's the best way I can put it. It's something that you do in the classroom that reaches those 4 purposes. It creates a safer classroom. It minimizes behaviors. It improves instruction. It creates better flow in the class. And I just wanted you to be able to walk away with at least 2 concepts, and then through the discussion, maybe a few more concrete, specific skills that you can use in your classrooms as you get ready to go do your further practicum, student teaching, and then ultimately your career. So if that didn't make complete sense, I apologize again. And I hope at least you're able now to walk away with a firm understanding what a classroom management strategy is. Your principals, your administrators are going to ask you, what strategy would you use to minimize this behavior? What strategy would you use to make sure that a Socratic seminar runs better? What strategy could you use to make sure that your labs were doing ABC? What strategy could you use for math teachers to make sure that your homework is more relevant, that the students are, showing their understanding better? I mean, these are the things that they're going to ask, and I wanted you to be equipped with an answer. So, now looking ahead a little bit, I'm going to save that for the PowerPoint. So looking ahead a little bit, this is your final discussion post this week. So that's kind of exciting. Here we are at the end of the semester in terms of the discussion board. So this is your last one. And I have a few questions about culture and diversity, and a question about working with students with special needs. I specifically have a question focusing on, because you're going to have this if you're going to teach in the Clark County School District, and I would argue you're going to have this teaching in any district really in the United States. You're going to have high levels of English language learners. You may end up having a student in your class that doesn't speak a lick of English. And so I want you to be thinking about how do you best deliver instruction for students that are in that situation. Now, there's a lot of limitations there, and the system is going to limit us there too. Especially in our district, we have seemed to have gotten rid of, at least in my experience, an English language learner program, in the sense that we have students that are building their language skills in a very scaffolded, kind of isolated class for English language learners. Instead, we've now moved to more of the special ed side of inclusion with ELLs, where we just throw them and immerse them into a classroom and into the culture in hopes that they'll pick up on language and academics at the same time, which is a struggle. So these are things I want you to be considering in this week's discussion, and as you're reading, things that you've seen, things that you're thinking about. Maybe ask advice of your mentors, and you can add that to the discussion this week about how are you going to best work with English language learners. There's some of the other things in the book. Yes, they're important. Socioeconomic status, gender. Those are important things to consider, but if I'm being honest, I don't consider them as much. If a student has socioeconomic status issues, if they're coming from poverty, sure, there are things I'm going to need to consider: lack of background knowledge, lack of structure, things like that, and I'm going to have to work with students in that way. But really, and this may sound bad because the book kind of frowned against it, I keep a high standard for all my students, high, medium, and low. And so I guess I'm not going to focus so much on that aspect of how do you help students in poverty, how do you differentiate between males and females. I'm really more concerned that you have the skills that you need to be able to tackle a student who's sitting in your class. I have 3 that are sitting in my class right now that speak no English, and how are you going to best serve them? And then in terms of special needs, you're going to have classrooms, I'll just put it this way, inclusion is the new model. Unless a student, and you're going to hear this term, least restrictive environment, unless a student cannot handle that environment, you're going to have students with special needs, and that's another thing I want you to consider, is how are you going to provide instruction for those that maybe don't process as, and I hate to use this word, I'm not even going to use that word, so don't process the same as other students, or as the general population might process. I hope I said that without sounding too politically incorrect. So just things to be considering. So this week you've got just one discussion, you've got 2 chapters to read, I believe it's chapters 11 and 12, and then just post on that discussion. And then next week will be my final video in this class. I'm just going to do a quick wrap-up video of this upcoming week's discussion, and then talk about your final 2 assignments, which are the teacher interview and the classroom management plan. And I'll talk a little bit about how maybe we can work together if you need to call me or Skype with me or meet me on campus if you have questions about those assignments. So I think that's about it just for the wrap up this week. Nice job. Great job again. I love this class. I love working with all of you. You're doing great. I've seen a lot of growth, a lot of development of your philosophy. And now you're getting close to where you need to consider it with all of the theories that I've just learned. And now these last 2 chapters, when I consider cultural diversity and just diversity in general in the classroom and students with special needs, how am I going to manage the dynamic classrooms that I'm going to be in my career, and starting to think about creating a management plan. And final note, that teacher interview is meant to kind of be a final wrap up as well. So it's almost, I put the teacher interview assignment where other professors use this assignment maybe earlier on. I intentionally put it here at the end of the semester to kind of be a sounding board for you. So please take the opportunity, with that teacher to discuss your management plan, discuss your philosophies. Think about, be a sounding board with that teacher. Think about, this is what I'm thinking of doing. What do you think? Get their feedback, because I think it'll help you really strengthen that final paper on your classroom management plan. So enough said on that. Thank you again for a great week. I look forward to one final week of discussion posts, and then I definitely look forward to seeing your culminating projects and how you have kind of applied all these things into a final cohesive plan. So have a great week, and I will hear from you either through emails or the discussion post or any other modes, and I will see you next week. Thanks.